Welcome to Let's Talk to Animals. My name is Shannon Kutz. I'm an animal sensitive and intuitive, a Reiki master practitioner, and an animal communication teacher with Animal Lovely Calm. And more importantly, for our purposes today, I am serving as your friendly neighborhood hostess for the Let's Talk to Animals podcast, the podcast all species can enjoy together. And if you heard that adorable little chirpy, chirpy, chirp. Then you just met my co hostess, my soul bird, Petal Pearl, and I've shared her story on other recent episodes of Let's Talk to Animals. So you can always go and search for that. Today, I have a very special, deeply personal story. And this podcast episode has been some time in the making. In fact, it's a story that spans several years of my life. And I offer it to you today, especially if you're listening and you're missing your pet who's passed into spirit and you're wishing with all of your heart that they could come back to you in a new body. We call this in the field pet reincarnation. And rewinding several years ago when I first received information about my own intuitive abilities and my animal communication abilities, and I started studying and practicing animal communication. If you had told me back then that I would eventually be specializing in pet reincarnation among other areas of specialization in the field, I would not have believed you. I really had my hands full just learning my craft. I was just so excited. And so all of my vision was simply on learning my craft and practicing it. I wasn't even beginning to dream of some of the different special areas where I could extend my newfound knowledge and skill set. And it really wasn't until my Pearl, my soul bird of 24 years, passed into spirit unexpectedly one morning that my journey to truly specialize in pet reincarnation officially began. And I really felt that call, and I felt the animals inspiring me, guiding me, and teaching me. I started to notice that my clients, my pet parent clients, often would seek me out for pet reincarnation related questions and issues. And the path unfolded. And when my petal came back to me after my pearl died, I kind of thought that that would be my big story to tell about my personal experiences with pet reincarnation, of course. Just a tiny tidbit of Petal Pearl's story is that this is the fourth time that my baby soul bird has come back to me, right? You were my childhood parakeet, Perky. You were my first cockatiel love, Jacob. You were my Pearl, and now you are Miss Petal. But not so long ago, I experienced miracle number two. And this all the while as I've been helping pet parents work with their own intuitive guidance and their bond with their pet to call their pets back to them through pet reincarnation. All of a sudden, a second miracle story unfolded in my own life. And that's the story that Petal and I are going to share with you today. So, if you've been a part of my world and my community for more than maybe a couple of years now, you may still remember my wonderful, charismatic, rescued box turtle, Bruce. Now, Bruce, when he first came to me, now, and box turtles, of course, they're those turtles that are famous for closing up completely front, back, and all the sides into their shells and not coming out unless they absolutely want to and they feel safe to do so. So that is where the box turtle gets its name. And I had been in love with box turtles ever since I saw a video of one on Facebook. But I didn't really have any plans to adopt a box turtle of my own. So the fact that Bruce came into my life at all felt like such a gift and such a miracle. And it's only in hindsight, looking back now, that I can see the trajectory and the wisdom and That's what I love about 2020 hindsight. Often it gets a bad rap because we look back and maybe there are some regrets, but I look back and I see so much gratitude, so many lessons, and I see how so many of the moving parts in my life at each step along the way that maybe didn't make sense, maybe much sense or any sense at the time, now make so much sense and have opened my heart beyond my wildest imaginings to animal wisdom, animal teachings, and animal empathy and love. So, what happened is I decided one day, very impulsively, I've kept water turtles all my life and am very familiar with their care needs and very comfortable taking care of water turtles, but I'd never cared for a tortoise, a land turtle. And one day I had, maybe you can relate if this has ever happened to you, I had a big fight with my then partner and we split up and I was on Craigslist of all places, and I was supposed to be looking for garage apartments because back in the day, that's where you went to look for garage apartments in my area. So I was supposed to be looking for garage apartments, but I was in a bit of a snit. And so instead, I typed in turtles and up popped the cutest face. I can't even begin to tell you this red dotted face. And the caption read, "Baby tortoises in need of rehoming." And of course, me being in my impulsive, how hard could it be mode of mildly to very irritated with the whole situation and how my life was going at that point, I immediately typed out a message to volunteer my home. And of course, I thought I was rescuing a baby tortoise. Turns out I was purchasing one. And that was the day that Malti tortoise, my now 10-year-old red footed tortoise, came home to stay. And Malti from the start was very independent, very headstrong, very determined, very smart, and very strong. And because at the time I lived in a place, I was in a garage apartment, of course. I finally found one. And I had a beautiful inside home, but I didn't have any outdoor space where I could set up a turtlearium or any place for her to safely run around in an enclosed environment. So every day I would take her outside. And she's just a little baby tortoise. She's about the size of an old school flip phone at this point, for those of you who remember those, or if you look at your smartphone and you cut it in half, theoretically, that's about the size Malti was back then. And so I would bring out my laptop and I worked from home a lot of days. So I would just work out on the lawn. I was a writer, a freelance writer. And so I would just do my work, write my articles while Malti ran around. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever expect that Malti would run away from me. So one day I was out on the lawn as usual with her and I looked down for a moment and I swear it was just a moment. And when I looked up, she was nowhere to be seen. And I got up, threw my laptop down, got up, started running around looking for her. Could not find her anywhere. She's only a year old. She's really tiny still. She's got really short legs. I mean, I look at my pinky finger and her back legs, which are her longest legs at the time, were probably like half the length of my pinky finger. So, like, really seriously, how far could she get? But she was gone. And so I started to hyperventilate. I started to freak out and I started to sob. And then I called my mom and like, "Monty's gone." Mom came rushing over and got me organized and we started printing up flyers. And there was this huge field across the street from the house I was living in and lots of undeveloped land. So it wasn't your usual in and out kind of pretty easy to search for a multi. It was really scary. Was a lot of undeveloped land, a lot of critters and characters around, and it was not too far away from the freeway. So I was really scared. And we started posting flyers and looking everywhere and accosting all of our neighbors out walking and knocking on doors. And it had only been about an hour after we posted a whole bunch of flyers and right around the couple block area near where I lived that I got a phone call. And the woman on the end sounded really excited. And she said, "I think I found your lost turtle." And of course, on the flyer, I had posted my cross street. Everybody knew the house I lived in anyway, because it was a kind of an iconic historic house. And so just posting the cross street, it was pretty clear where I was living. And I posted my phone number and I printed up a just a huge full color photo of Maltese red and orange and yellow dotted face. So she's so distinctive looking. And I was just so excited. I was like, oh my goodness. And so the woman told us where to go, and it was far. Like, it was several blocks, and I thought, "This doesn't I just don't see how my little tiny baby hatchling tortoise could have gotten that far so fast," but I'm willing to believe in miracles, so we got in the car and drove over there, and when we got out, the woman was still standing there with her dog, and she said, "My dog found your tortoise." And another woman was standing there as well, and this other woman handed me a tan-colored, tightly closed turtle that was clearly not Malty. Bruce and Malty look nothing alike. They're not the same species. There was no resemblance whatsoever. And as I held this tightly closed shell between my palms, the woman whose yard it turned out to be started explaining that her grandson had a little habit, a bad habit. She thought it was adorable. I thought it was a really bad habit for lots and lots of turtle welfare related reasons. But when he would find a turtle, he would bring it to grandma and release it in grandma's yard. And unfortunately, grandma had a couple of big dogs. And so those turtles that were released into grandma's yard were keen to escape. And that's exactly what this turtle had been trying to do. I learned later that it was just the time of year when box turtles, who are a hibernating species, would emerge and go out to seek mates and replenish, eat their food, drink water, start their spring season. That's exactly what this turtle had been trying to do when the woman's neighbor's dogs spotted the turtle and started to bark and harass this turtle. And I said to the woman, "Thank you so much for calling me, but this is not my missing turtle." And the woman whose yard it was said to me, "Oh, you lost a turtle? Well, here, do you want this one?" And handed the turtle back to me again. And now keep in mind, at this point in time, I had not yet discovered that I was having two-way conversations with animals. I was still in the habit of hiring animal communicators, and I had been doing that for years. But I had no awareness that I was intuitive or psychic or that I had any ability to receive animal messages directly. So all I remember is holding this turtle in my hands between my palms. I had one palm under the turtle's plastron, the lower shell, and my other palm was curved over the turtle's carapace, the upper shell. And I remember feeling so sad and thinking inside my head, one turtle doesn't replace another, and he's not yours to give. This animal is free and wild, and animals are not ours, humans, to give. Of course, I didn't say any of this out loud. It was just this profound feeling of sadness and just, I felt such a deep respect for this shell, this being between my palms. And I just thought, no. I mean, the only thing that came out of my mouth was thank you, no. Of course, I was raised in the South. I was raised to be polite. And so I just said, thank you, no, and handed the turtle back to the woman whose yard it was. And mom and I got back in the car and went home and continued our search. And in the meantime, because we were not getting anywhere, I hired two different animal communicators to help me find Malty. My normal communicator that I had been working with didn't have time to do much more than a brief check in and some dowsing, which, if you're not familiar, is working with a pendulum or other type of indicator to get a sense of geographic location. And so I had to find someone else to help me continue. So my first communicator that I was in the habit of hiring, my first choice, all she really told me was Malty headed north and she's not far away. So then I started to hunt around looking for another communicator who could help me find Malti. And what was so interesting at this point is I'd never hired a communicator to work on a missing animal case before. So I wasn't aware of how many communicators there are out there in the world who believe that only certain species can converse with humans or have the intelligence to hold a conversation. And I spoke with several communicators who told me they only work with dogs, cats, and horses because those are the only species that can communicate. And I just thought to myself, that's not true. So I kept searching. Nobody was calling me back. And finally, I got a call from the most wonderful communicator. And she said, well, of course, turtles and tortoises can communicate, and I would be happy to help you. And so she and I went to work, and she gave me the same basic information that my first choice communicator had given me, that Malti went north and she wasn't far away. She also told me that Malti, because she was so tiny and she was in very tall, unmowed area, she had lost her geolocation bearings. Turtles and tortoises have very strong ability to connect with the magnetic coordinates of our planet, and they're very, very good at finding their way around and remembering where they've been. In fact, there's some really cool scientific studies with red-footed tortoises in particular that show that they outperform mice and rats and chimpanzees at computer simulation tests and maze tests. So I'll post some of those for you in the show notes if you're curious to learn more because they are fascinating. But Malti, because she was so tiny and this was her first big adventure, she just had kind of lost her bearings. And so that was really our challenge, was to try to help her find her geolocation center again and get her to a structure where maybe I could find her. And she also told the communicator that she was still in the process of deciding whether she wanted to be a companion turtle. She had not gotten lost. And here was another area that was so interesting because I said to the communicator that I was working with, I said, I get this feeling that maybe Malti wanted to be free, or she wanted to go explore and see what else there was out there for her. And the communicator said she absolutely is trying to decide whether she wants to be a captive tortoise or whether she wants to be free. And I said, as much as my heart would hurt, that's her choice. And again, this is me pre animal communication, but I was just having these feelings like it's her choice. As much as it will hurt me, it's her life, it's her choice. I don't own her. I have no agency to decide for her what her life is going to be like. So let's see if we can, let's find out what she needs to bring her home. So 6 more days went by, and I mean, it was excruciating. It's all I did. My parents ended up helping me with rent that month because I lost so much time working because I was always out looking for Malti. And we were having these epic, they now have gone down in history, at least in Houston history, as the epic Memorial Day floods of 2015. You can look it up on the internet. And I was out in the pouring rain. I mean, we had flooding all over the city. We had these huge puddles. And I just kept thinking, how is little tiny Malti going to survive? Well, on the seventh day, 1 week had gone by and I was losing hope. On the seventh day, I got another phone call, and I had woken up that morning just feeling so demoralized, so exhausted. I kept trying to talk to Malti inside my head and just saying, I am going to find you. I'm your mom. I'm going to find you. I'll make everything, all the accommodations you need. I really, well, I can't stop looking for you. But I was feeling so demoralized and just so depressed and defeated, really, to be honest, when I get this phone call. And again, because of the historic nature of the house that I lived in, that intersection, everybody kind of knew where I lived just by my cross streets. I get this phone call from a very excited young woman, and she says to me, I have your missing tortoise. And I thought, oh, thank goodness, at last. She said, I'm driving over to your house right now. So they come racing around the corner and pull up at the curb. The woman gets out and she's holding a turtle between her hands, and she hands him to me and she says, "Here." And immediately I looked at the tan colored shell and I said to her, this is not my missing tortoise." And her face fell. Oh, she had been so excited, and she said, "We saw this turtle about to step off the curb and cross this really, really busy street. We knew he was gonna get crushed. We pulled over, we grabbed him, and we came over to your house right away." And you have to understand, just to give you some context, the area I lived in was becoming increasingly urbanized, and so we almost never saw turtles or tortoises out. Used to be something that people in that area would see, but it was very uncommon. And certainly seeing a full grown adult turtle trying to cross a busy street in broad daylight, that's very unusual in that area. And so, as she said that, I looked more closely at this particular shell and realized I recognize this turtle. Oh my goodness. This is the same turtle that I got a call about 6 days ago. And all I could think of was there's something here. Again, pre animal communication, but I just felt like this couldn't possibly be a coincidence. And the woman was so disappointed. And so I said to her, "Well, this isn't my missing turtle, but kind of have an empty area where Malty used to be. And so why don't I take this turtle and I'll just foster him or her until I can find suitable arrangements." Well, the woman immediately brightened up. Clearly, she's a big fan of happy endings. And she and her husband went off to enjoy their day. And I walked upstairs with this new tan colored shell and thought, what did I just commit to? And I looked at this turtle. And of course, I shared with you earlier that box turtles can close their shells completely. And they do this and they are able to avoid predation. Raccoons, even dogs, it takes 50 pounds or more of pressure to open a box turtle shell manually. They are very strong. Those muscles are very, very strong. This terrified shell, he cracked open his little carapace and his plastron, and all I could see were these beautiful little red eyes staring at me. And I just thought, okay, if I'm really not meant to find Malty, then I will care for you until we can figure something out. Then I went and I got on Facebook, and I had a friend in India who was an intuitive and an animal communicator, and he had messaged me and he said, "Go out, you will find your missing tortoise today. Look to the north." And so I left the turtle that would be named Bruce in my office, and I grabbed my walking stick and my sunglasses and hat, and I walked outside. And 15 minutes later, I found Malty hiding under a flowering bush alongside a neighbor's driveway, just 1 block to the northeast from where I was living. That's how close she had been. And that's how Bruce joined our family. Now, Bruce was a feral rescue, which meant Bruce had originally been wild. And because box turtles are so prized in the pet trade and they're so charismatic and they're so interesting and they're so intelligent, a lot of people will find them, especially young kids, and they'll pick them up and they'll take them home until they get tired of them or they forget that they have them or the turtle manages to escape. But box turtles have a really strong need to stay close to the geographic range where they were born. And so Bruce, if he had been released again, would have continued wandering, looking for home, and nobody knew where his original birth site was. And later, when I was able to communicate with Bruce, I really did get this impression that his original home was no longer viable. In other words, we had poured concrete on it. We had turned it into something. So he essentially was what a rehabilitator would have considered unreleasable. What was so interesting was that when I really convened with the animal communicator afterwards, and I asked her, "Can I just hire you for an additional session to talk to this new turtle? Because now I've got Malty back and I've got this new turtle. I don't know if this is a boy or a girl. I am pretty sure from the pictures I've seen on the internet that this is a box turtle." a three-toed box turtle, a Texas three-toed box turtle. But I'm not he just is behaving like he wants to stay. Like, he climbed up on top of Maltese big stuffed alligator, which is this ridiculous giant alligator stuffed animal that I bought for Maltese to hide under when she was a hatchling, and he crawled up on top of it, and he kind of planted himself right on the top of it, and he just looked at me, and it was like, "I just feel like this turtle is telling me that he is home." And she said, "He is. That's why he was walking in your direction. That is why he tried to cross that busy street. He was geolocating to you." And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, how on earth could that be possible? Ask yourself how it could be possible that animals could help us detect seizures or heart attacks or anxiety, that animals could trek across the country to reunite with their people after being separated by a natural disaster. Animals can geolocate the humans that they want to be with. And this turtle had done exactly that. And she also told me, she said, he wants a strong masculine name. And of course, me, I'm like, oh, he's so cute. I want to name him something adorable. And she said, none of that ridiculous stuff. He wants a really strong name like Bruce. And I said, well, that wasn't where I was headed, but if that's the name that he wants, then okay. So I actually named him Bruce after the shark in Finding Nemo that never knew his father. And that became kind of part of his persona, his personality, because that's actually true for Bruce. But the first 3 years of Bruce's life with us, I had to move twice before I found a suitable outdoor area for this adult feral rescued box turtle to live, because Bruce could not tolerate living indoors. He wouldn't stay in any structure that I put him in. He was an incredible climber. He could climb out of just about anything. Total escape artist and very, very restless indoors. So I had to house him outdoors, and he needed a large structure. So I had to move several times before we found accommodations that would suit him. And all the while, as I was caring for him, he was just terrified of me. He was so scared of me. He did not want anything to do with me. He did not understand how to be with a human in a way that wouldn't be scary. And so I used to bring him his food every day. It was such a challenge even getting him to eat, because I couldn't find anything that he recognized. And after some time of trial and error, I finally gave him some fresh steamed salmon fish that I had that my mom had made. And he loved that. He fell in love with it. And after that, I would try to bring him things like that along with some wildlife prey every other day, because that's what they need. That's what these animals eat. And if I was going to care for him, I was going to care for him in a way that worked for him. And so I used to bring him his food on a big food rock every day so it would look as naturalistic as possible. And I would come up to his enclosure, which was like 6 feet by 3 feet. It was pretty big. And he would run away from me, and I would quickly put his food rock in with all of his food on it. And I would say to him, you never have to interact with me. You never have to like me. You never have to be sociable with me. It is such an honor for me to care for you. I love you just the way you are. And all you have to do, please, is eat the food, drink the water, and be a healthy box turtle. And I will care for you for the rest of your life. And when he was ready to hibernate, even though that was total fear factor for me, I was totally freaked out. It can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing to hibernate a captive turtle. We got through it the first year. We got through it the second year. We got through it the third year. In the meantime, I'd had to move again. And the third year he was in hibernation, we had a terrible winter. We had such an intense freeze. And I was so scared because box turtles do pretty well in hibernation in a certain temperature range. But when it starts to creep down past the 30s into the 20s, you're really in a danger zone. And a lot of box turtles, a lot of hibernating animals don't make it through hibernation season. And so I would go out, I installed a red light bulb above his outdoor enclosure to kind of warm up the ambient air. I added extra insulation. I would go out and I would just stand there and talk to him and just say, I hope you're okay in there. I just try to add prayer, just anything I could do. Still wasn't talking to animals, but I was just talking to him just because I needed something to do. And would just say, please make it, please make it, please make it. And somehow, I don't know exactly what happened, but when he woke up that spring, this is year number 3, something had changed. He became like a puppy with a show. It's like he finally decided to trust me. He finally overrode all those years of trauma and relocation and mishandling and possibly abuse and hunger and fear. And he decided that maybe he couldn't trust all the humans in this world, but he could trust me. And he became the most charismatic, playful, loving, lovable box turtle. He would climb all the way up me and cuddle under my neck, under my chin. He loved the camera and the camera loved him, and he would run up to it and just if you're familiar with Otis, the box turtle from Garden State Tortoise, he's become a media celebrity. Bruce was like that. And he became an internet sensation. I can't tell you how fast my Instagram account grew once I started filming Bruce. Everybody fell in love with Bruce, most of all me. So we had about 3.5 blissful years. And then I could sense that Bruce was getting restless and he wanted more space, and I did not have more space. So I tried to jerry rig his enclosure together with Maltie's old enclosure because she had outgrown it by this time. Redfoot tortoises get pretty big. And I tried to put it together into a 20-foot by 3-foot enclosure that he could run around in. I was getting pulled constantly. My dad was getting very sick, and I was not available the way I had been. And he started biting me and he started escaping. He was so good at escaping. He managed to crawl up the side, pry open the top, one of the hatch doors at the very top of this enclosure, fall 6 feet to the ground, and wander away. And I found him after several days' search. I found him, and still, after I found him, returned him, he continued biting. So I had to pull back on my handling him and interacting with him. And then my dad got sicker and I just wasn't home. And one night we had a really torrential rainstorm. And by that time, my dad had passed and my mom had had an epic, unexpected fall and had broken her femur and her left wrist. And so I was living with her in the hospital and then at rehab. And one day I came home to check on Bruce, and the bottom had fallen out of his enclosure in the middle where I joined the two together, and he had escaped again. And while I tried to look for him, my mom needed me. I had 2 other animals, and actually 3 because I was caring for my mom's dachshund as well. And I was never able to find him again. And it was one of the most heart-wrenching times in my life. I had lost my best friend, Marcy, unexpectedly. I lost my dad unexpectedly. My relationship of 15 years had ended and I had walked away. And then Bruce escaped, and I ended up moving, giving up my home and moving in with mom to help her. And my whole life just changed. Almost it felt like overnight, but it was really over a period of about 6 months. And I just I just thought I was never going to have a box turtle ever again. I would get calls and texts every so often from someone who would say they had seen Bruce, but they were never able to capture him or give me any more information. And so it was just a very dark, very hard, sad period in my life. And I understood that Bruce wanted to be free. And what was so interesting about the timing of it all and the energy of it all, by then I had started learning animal communication. And so I had begun practicing and having two-way conversations. And I talked to Bruce myself and I asked him, of course, I felt so close to the situation and just emotionally very compromised, but I did my best to ask. And I said, "Do you want to be free?" And he said, "Yes, I want to be free. When I came to you, I was starving and scared, and I felt very weak and incapable of living a wild life in the area that I was in, and I just had lost confidence in myself. And now I'm strong and I'm well fed and I'm healthy and I can do it. And I want to experience that. I want to know for myself that I can live a strong, brave, happy, wild adult box turtle life." And I asked several of my animal communication mentors and colleagues to also tune in, and they would report back and say, "Yes, he wants to be free. This is his choice. He knew that you were never going to be able to let him go." Because I used to try. I used to say, "If you'll just hang on a little longer, I'll release you." And he was right. I don't think I would have been able to do it. It would have just been so hard to watch him walk away. So he took his life into his own paws and claws, and he had every right to do it, but it was so very difficult. And I never really stopped grieving. And if you've ever had an animal go missing or pass and you haven't had that closure, I feel very sure that you empathize, you understand what that feeling is like. And so that is where I thought my story with Bruce would end. And because we're getting up there, and I like to keep these episodes around 30 to 45 minutes, I'm going to do something a little unusual for me, and I'm going to leave you with a cliffhanger. And we're going to continue this story with a part two that you will have in 2 weeks' time. So, thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to share part two and the grand finale, or the continual unfolding, shall I say, of my story with Bruce in part two. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do leave me a review on your favorite streaming platform. It really helps my podcast continue. It helps encourage me to keep making episodes. It helps me answer your questions. And it's a way for me to hear from you and know what you're interested in learning more about. And it's just always so fun to connect with you. So please do leave a review, and I will be back with you in 2 weeks for the continuation of my story, my adventures with Bruce. So, all my love. Bye for now.